Muzzle-loading deer hunting. This is an activity that has captured the hearts of many hunters throughout the country, especially in the past 5 or 10 years. Seasons have been added for muzzleloader hunters towards the end of the regular firearm deer seasons, expanding the times that you can hunt. Plus, muzzleloading has a romance to it that I guess the modern firearms don't. The colonial weapons that are used, stalking through the woods like Daniel Boone. A lot of romance to it, right, Al Shady?
Right.
Al Shady's become a muzzleloading hunter. Right. You have a tale to tell, which relates to, well, you can find it in any book that tells about black powder hunting. And Al, it has here on page 8, big letters right at the top. Make no mistake about it, black powder or pyrodex are the only propellant powders that are safe to use in muzzleloading firearms. You agree with that?
Absolutely. You know, you read that when you start out to put the muzzleloader together to start with, but you miss a few things along the way. It's good to go back and read it again.
You have to be extremely careful in muzzleloading. As Al will tell, we'll unveil this story here. What happened to you was you were at the dentist's office and you saw a nice little snow in December. It looked like a great tracking snow. Right. And you thought if you could get done with the dentist and get out hunting quickly.
Yep. I thought I'd get out there before it got dark and before the snow melted and see what was going on. So I ran through the garage and picked up all the stuff, my clothes and gun and whatever, grabbed the cans of powder off the shelf and ran out. Well, I get to the woods and slip on my clothes and reach for the gun, and I grabbed a can and just poured some powder down the barrel, put a ball and a cap on, and walked out into the woods.
Let's back up here, Al. I'm sure it's covered in this book on muzzle loading. You grab the cans off the shelf where you normally keep your cans of powder. Right. And a little fact here that slipped in, your son came home, who's a shotgun reloader.
Right.
Mixed in some of his cans on the same shelf.
Right. Didn't pay any attention, didn't read the can.
Well, they look pretty much the same, right?
Well, they did to me at the time.
Did at the time. But he grabbed the shotgun powder.
Right.
Taken it out, dumped it into the muzzleloader. There's mistake number 2, not measuring it.
Absolutely.
But what you had done here, let's take a look at these powders. You brought some samples here. Here is the pyrodex powder that you were used to shooting.
Right.
This is black powder, which is a substitute that...
Which is what I thought I had.
You thought you had, but instead you had shotgun powder.
Right.
Shotgun powder, which is highly explosive, extremely fast burning. It's not supposed to be used in muzzle loaders. So there you were, your muzzle loader filled with possibly an overcharge of smokeless explosive powder.
Right.
Off you go into the woods in December.
Yep.
Al Shady, Daniel Boone. Stalking the big buck. What happened?
Fortunately, I didn't see the big buck, because when I come back to the van at night after it got dark, or started to get dark, I decided to unload the gun, and of course the easiest way is to fire it. And so I pointed it at the ground and pulled the trigger, and
let
of course,
her fly.
You know, I got all kinds of pieces, but I walked away from it.
Let's look at the gun. Here it is. Your muzzle loader. Right. Was this the first time you'd used it, or second time?
No, about second time out with it.
Second time out with it. This muzzle loader is totally ruined, to say the least.
Right.
You held this in your hands when you fired it.
Right.
It blew the whole thing apart. I mean, there's metal down here from the barrel. Jeez, oh, Pete.
There's 6-inch pieces of barrel that are gone. I haven't the slightest idea where those went.
They flew off somewhere, but fortunately not in your body.
Right.
What were you wearing at the time?
I had on a pair of gloves, which it put a few holes in and took.
Well, put that on there.
All right.
That looked like it would take your thumb right off.
Well, it probably should have, but it didn't. You know,
didn't touch your thumb?
Didn't even burn the hair on the thumb.
What about your jacket?
Well, it allowed me to find out that it was actually a down-filled coat.
Yeah.
It opened it up pretty well. And then, of course,
it didn't hit you in the leg?
No, with the trousers that I had on, they were bib overalls enough that they protected from coming all the way through. But all these little powder and probably pieces of steel parts opened it up. And, of course, I ended up with one piece in my arm with a handful of chicken feathers that we had to take out surgically. But I walked away from it, and as far as I can tell, it's only because the Lord kept me there that I stayed there. Otherwise, I'd been gone.
When this gun exploded, I mean, the pressure it must have taken looking at this barrel here. When that exploded, it was pretty loud?
I didn't hear for a couple of days.
Is that right?
Yeah, the radio was nothing but rattle, and I've lost some hearing in one ear because of it, but I hear pretty well, but enough that wind noises in the woods now create difficulty in picking out sounds where they're coming from.
Well, this has turned Al Shady into somewhat of a muzzleloader safety expert. You load your gun now. In fact, you had all the ingredients. You had a pre-set charge of powder that you carry with you. Now, and this is a good tip to preload at home.
Right.
And of course, this is labeled Pyrodex. And normally you would dump that powder charge from the preloaded tube down the barrel.
Right.
Now, why didn't you do that?
Well, I only had the one with me, and in case I had to have a second shot.
You were kind of optimistic.
Yeah, I was kind of planning ahead. You know, I was going to have a preloaded shot in case I had a second shot, and so I didn't want to pour that in the barrel, or otherwise I'd have normally used that.
Oh, and here's of course, companies make pre-charged loads here, and this one has, well, 2 of the primers, and also inside there's powder in one side, pre-measured, black powder or Pyrodex. On the other side, well, actually down the tube, there's a patch and ball ready to go. So the thing is, you'd really recommend carrying a couple of these.
If you're going to, plan on shooting more than one shot, I think it's a good idea, I think, to preload them. Yeah.
But especially to make sure that you know the powders you have in. These powders look so much alike. The Pyrodex black powder and the shotgun powder. If you get them mixed up, it could be a extremely dissatisfying experience, and I guess it was lucky that this wasn't a fatal mistake. If you had had this gun up to your cheek,
probably would have taken my head off, I think. Man. At least.
Al Shady's story is a lesson to all shooters, especially muzzle loaders. Read your instruction books and heed the warnings about the safe use and operation of your firearm. And when it comes to the difference between powders, keep in mind how they burn. Black powder, explosive by itself, burns in a flash. Lots of smoke, but it doesn't develop tremendous pressure. Pyrodex is a black powder substitute that is not as explosive, making it safer. Modern shotgun smokeless powder is quite difficult to ignite and burns slowly when it's loose, but when it's contained, it develops extremely high pressures that make it dangerous to use in older weapons or in muzzle loaders. Firearms have lots of positive recreational and practical uses, but please take your time, think about what you're doing, and use your gun safely.